This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thanks for joining us. We've got a great show for you today. We'll be joined today by Steven Miska, Transitional Executive Director, PACT Act for the Department of Veteran Affairs. This means he serves as the Senior Advisor to the Secretary of Veteran Affairs, providing oversight on the development, adoption, and implementation of the PACT Act. But before we get to that, Stacy, I must ask you, what's been going on?
Well, you and I, we got back from the convention and I was thinking about Joe, and then because we missed him so much, I saw him pop up and he's growing some facial hair and I could not be outdone. So I had to grow some facial hair.
Wait, is that facial hair, Joe?
I heard, Adam, don't be sassy. You know I can't grow hair. I'm very sensitive about it. But I heard that Stacy accidentally left her tweezers in New Orleans.
I did. Yeah. So yes, this is all natural, and no razor.
You look like a youth leader.
For those not watching with their eyes but listening with their ears, what would you say Stacy's rocking, Joe?
I'd say she's pulling a full-on Tony Stark right now.
Like it's like a Spaniard.
I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark.
All I need is I could use some Iron Man money.
You've got the right like the colors too. I don't know if he was ever in plaid, but
the Marvel franchise. No, maybe when he crashed out in the country. Where did he end up crashing? Yeah. Midwest. He was wearing a poncho. It's pretty close. But anyway, I thought I'd hearken to whatever you've got going on your face that somewhat resembles
my face or Joe's face.
Nah, Joe's.
Oh yeah, we're still picking on the disabled guy right now. So
listen, I can only see what's from the boobs up, and and you look completely.
And it's not a lot.
And it's covered with a lot of speckly hair. So I thought I'd.
It grows in blonde. I'm doing the best I can. I've got some Cherokee blood.
You're a ginger. What are you gonna do?
Hey, side note, apparently that's legitimately a insult now. Like,
oh, is it?
Believe it.
Yeah, it's like a hate crime.
Okay, I'm really sorry for all you beautiful redheads out there. I have beautiful redheads in my family. I didn't realize that's become something I shouldn't be saying. So I
don't know if that's true. That's just what my kids told me. Maybe it's just on TikTok.
Please
I just wanted to scare you.
Please don't cancel me for losing my tweezers in New Orleans or calling people by the G word.
We'll always have New Orleans.
That was a hard R too.
Nola?
No, on ginger.
Oh, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I like a little ginger and turmeric. Like
it's ginger actually, but okay.
I like ginger beer.
I don't like gingivitis.
Oh god. Such a dad joke. Oh, God.
Dad, this is what happens when we're not allowed to be awful anymore because we have kids watching us. This is what's left.
Well,
all right. Well, it's good to have the gang back together.
It is. I've missed you guys a great deal.
I missed you.
All right, Alphas, please stick around. We'll be back to talk with Steven Miska right after the break.
Are you struggling with debt, budgeting, or credit score issues? VetSense has got you covered. Get expert advice on managing debt, crafting a budget, and improving your credit score. Our platform offers personalized financial education and up to 3 financial or credit counseling sessions. Don't let financial stress hold you back. Take control of your financial future today. Visit vetsense.org to get started.
Today, we are joined by VA PACT Act Transitional Executive Director Steven Miska, which I checked, it does not fit on a single business card. He has to give out 2 business cards. Steven, welcome to Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Thanks, Joe. Really excited to be here and join you guys.
Thanks so much.
Yep. And I want to welcome you too. And also thank you for your service. I'm curious, where are you from originally? how did you come about joining the service? What'd you do in the service? And what was your transition out of service like?
Sure. Yeah. Well, number one, Stacy, it's an honor for me to join combat veterans like we have on this show here. And I grew up on Long Island, and actually on a potato farm to start, if you can believe there are still farms on Long Island. It's way out on the end, and they're all converted now to vineyards, so it's pretty nice wine country out there. But my dad had been a Vietnam vet, and when I was 16, he asked me, what I was thinking about for college, and I said, I really don't know. And he suggested that I might look into West Point, and I said, I've never even heard of West Point, and looked into it and was fortunate enough to get accepted, and then went off into the Army for a long while.
Long Island. I've been out there. I have a service dog. His name's Charlie, and he came
My
from.
My brother has a service dog too.
Does he?
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Buka.
Joe as well. We both have service dogs from America's Vet Dogs out of is it Smithtown?
Smithtown,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Off the Jericho
Great.
Turnpike.
Awesome.
You can get a dog, go across the street and buy a car.
Yeah, Charlie's part-time job is actually at one of the wineries, passing out samples. So.
Awesome.
That's how
I need that part-time job too. Can I come join you?
Yeah, that's how we met. He was holding up a sign saying, "We'll work for food," right outside the winery when they laid him off. So how did you get involved with becoming, how did you get involved? How did you get hired on as the executive director for the VA PACT Act? What's that position like?
So I worked with the secretary and the deputy secretary previously on the National Security Council. I spent 40 months in Iraq. And when and my kids were in Bavaria at the time, my wife and kids lived there. That's where they grew up. And I just got stuck in the do loop of deployments, in and out of Iraq. And so when we decided to move back to the States in 2010, I was heading to DC because it was one of the few places where I wasn't going to be moving my family every year, chasing different jobs and stuff. I could leave them in one spot, let the kids start high school and that sort of stuff. And I ended up doing a counterterrorism fellowship before joining the NSC as director for Iraq, as we were working on the whole drawdown. So anyway, I realized I was probably never going to get a job in the Army again after that, given that most of the leadership in the Army, their position was they didn't want to completely draw down. And so I went to teach at Quantico, Marine Corps University, and then ended up saying, you know what, this government stuff isn't for me. Intentionally let my security clearance lapse and moved to Southern California to do nonprofit work.
Nice.
And so anyway, my mom told me never say never. And sure enough, I was very involved in Afghanistan and the fallout around our interpreters, of which I had done a lot to help Iraqi interpreters previously, and wrote a book on that experience. So anyway, I was well known in the vulnerable refugee community at vet circles, and was asked to help with a lot of nonprofits as we were trying to get Afghans out. And I called up the secretary and said, hey, this is going to be a big deal in the veteran community. VA needs to lean into this. And to his credit, they did. They started working, John Borsler in the Veterans Experience Office, and the now Deputy Secretary, Tanya Bradshaw, started making sure there were resources available at VA that vets could reach out to in the mental health space and other ways based on Afghanistan. And then I just happened to run into the secretary on a flight out of Dulles one day, just by happenstance. And he said, hey, come get coffee with me next time you're in DC. And I said, okay, thinking naively he wanted an update on Afghanistan, but no, he said, no, I need some help with this thing called the PACT Act. It's going to be a big deal. And he was worried about implementation. And so he wanted what the team affectionately called one throat to choke, i.e. somebody he could lean on anytime something was going wrong with PACT. And so I became that guy.
And he wanted that throat to be yours.
Well, you know what? When the deputy told me that, she said, yeah, we kind of laugh and say this is one throat to choke. I said, well, you know, the secretary tried to choke me before when we worked at the White House, and I questioned his throat choking skills, actually, because I'm still around.
There you go. Oh, well, it's awesome, Steven. It's such a unique journey, and I think there's excited to kind of dive into some of those stops along the way.
Yeah.
Excited to hear some more updates about the PACT Act, but I think maybe the place I'd like to stop first and hear a little bit more about is your nonprofit community contributions and service. And you also had let's see, well, Stacy, Joe, and myself are very involved in veteran support nonprofit space as well. And I wanted to hear about Servant Leader Citizen Consulting, which serves the nonprofit community. And then also you have First Amendment Voice, which is a non-partisan nonprofit organization. So can you tell us a little bit about those and your trip to Southern California and how great that was? It must have been.
You know, well, I got out there and I said, I'm retired, and I'm a scuba diver. I love diving, and
nice.
California was the first time since stationed in Panama where I could go to the beach and get a dive in. And anyway, so I said, I'm just going to hang out on the beach and go diving. And both my wife and daughter, who was living with us at the time, were like, oh, no. You need to go find something to do that is going to, you know, focus you a little bit. And I thought I was going into the nonprofit space, but I thought I was going to join an established nonprofit. And as I interviewed, I realized, you know, based on different boards and stuff, that maybe I might not be the right fit. And so I just started to do some of my own work in the nonprofit space. And that was the genesis of SLC Consulting, and just starting that up to support nonprofits. And I was looking at counterterrorism type stuff. Actually met some folks up in San Bernardino after the terrorist attack up there, and was looking at community resiliency and things like that after traumatic experiences. When I got asked to help with First Amendment Voice, which was a project of the Global Peace Foundation. And when they spun that whole thing off, I became the executive director. And I led in that space for about 5 years, which was fascinating because it's all the First Amendment freedoms, you know, so freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble. And it was, you know, all the lightning rod issues that we read about in the media. And we were trying to create space where it was okay to disagree with somebody, but to do it in a way which wasn't, you know, disagreeable, I guess. To do it in a civil manner where we could discuss really contentious issues with people who had different viewpoints. So it was really challenging space in a lot of ways. A lot, as I'm sure you all are aware, with the changes in technology and the digital landscape, the media landscape, and how differentiated it has become, right? And so I was looking at things like media. Adfonts Media is a nonprofit that focuses on the reliability of media and then where they lean left and right. And so they were producing work on that they called the media bias chart that just showed the bell curve of space out there in terms of reliability and just whether or not they were partisan or not in one direction or the other.
Can't believe how hard it is. I agree 100% to find news that's not telling you how to think. I just want a Walter Cronkite, I just need somebody, this is what's happening.
I agree. And it was, just super interesting. It was really, I need things to keep my mind going. So anyway, that space was just really fascinating. We did things like looking at the Colin Kaepernick and him sitting out with during the national anthem in protest, and thinking through creating space where people could come together and, number one, learn more about the issue, because as you know, you're only a lot of times getting surface level understanding in the press. And when you start getting into depth and you start talking about, I'm blanking on the veteran who was a place kicker for the Seattle Seahawks. Anyway, he sat down with Kaepernick for a couple hours when he first started protesting, and was like, what, I just want to understand what's going on here. And he was the one that suggested that maybe he take a knee, because that is a way to demonstrate that you're still being respectful, but you're protesting and staying true to your principles as well. And so it was getting deeper into stories like that and sharing that with others, so that you added a little nuance and context to the story, was just, incredible. Yeah, Nate Boyer, exactly. Thank you, Holly. And getting to meet people who had done work like that. I watching a nurse who went out to counter protesters in Phoenix during COVID. And she was a ICU nurse, and she and her colleagues went out and stood in front of the protesters in their scrubs, and were spit on and called imposters, you're actors out here. And all that sort of space was just interesting to explore. So that's some of the work that I was doing with FAV. And then, but my longtime passion and interest in the nonprofit space was always around vulnerable partners, right? The colleagues that we've all worked with, Iraqis, Afghans, Syrians, Somalis, whoever, where we were in conflict zones. And a lot of them are interpreters, but there's other local national partners who we can't accomplish the mission without, right? They are our cultural eyes, ears, and mouthpieces. And so working on policy to better insulate them, helping nonprofits in that space, whether they're focused on resettlement or getting people out of harm's way. And so anyway, that's a lot of the work that SLC Consulting that I did through that vehicle.
Well, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I appreciate it. Turn it over to you, Joe.
I'm sorry. I'm really fired up about this, and the reason why is, you've been involved in these policy issues, and you've mentioned the resettlement of interpreters from combat zones, and I want to let you know that really resonates with me, and I wanted to personally thank you for that. I worked with a great man by the name of Sammy, and he was loved by everyone, and we were actively working through the red tape to bring him back to the U.S. with us, and trying to hunt down his family. When unfortunately, along with a Marine by the name of Chris Ebert, he was killed by an IED in the very Humvee I was trying to get to when I myself was injured running across a bridge in Fallujah. I lost my left leg in Iraq. I was a corpsman with 2 Marines. So like you, we saw that need to protect and resettle these awesome people who were putting their lives at risk just on the chance to make something of themselves, on the chance to make, to be a part of something bigger than themselves and make some money doing it. And so I would love to hear like how you got involved with these vulnerable people. I want, at what point did you realize the need was there?
Sure. So I was actually in Tikrit, Joe, when you were down in Fallujah, and it was kinetic up there, not as bad as it got down in Fallujah, but I remember, we had a lot of Iraqi workers coming onto the palace. We called it FOB Danger at 1ID headquarters, call sign there. And anyway, we were getting a lot of intel feeds basically saying people were receiving threats from while commuting to work in taxis. And you remember those orange and white taxis running around Iraq, right?
Yeah.
So we ended up doing an operation over about a week-long period. And we kind of drugged the Iraqi police. You know, they were reluctant partners, but we brought them in with us, and we set up checkpoints all over Tikrit. And we had the driver of the taxi get out. We took a photograph of the driver of the taxi, photographed the license plate, and then we took one of those shipping labels we use on all the military equipment and stuff, and we put it on the taxi's windshield. And then we let them go. And so we were cataloging all the taxis, right? And for several months after that, no more threats from taxis. And as a matter of fact, we got reads that, you know, they didn't know what the shipping label was, but they thought we were tracking them by satellite. Actually, we had the shipping label was just BS, man. We just put it on there. And it was just us getting inside the insurgent's head. And I remember, you know, feeling all smug about it. But as I reflected on it, fast forward a couple years in Baghdad, I was there in 06 and 07, 16 months. That was the bonus tour. And I did not remember this, even the name of a single Iraqi we helped in that operation. We called it Operation Orange Crush. And I just remember thinking, you know, that's like a doctor with no bedside manner, you know, and that's not who I am. That's not who most of the people I was serving with was. And Baghdad was really bad in late 06 and then pretty much all of 07. We were having Iraqis killed out from underneath us. And they had just passed this, you know, special immigrant visa. And I told my team, I was like, man, we can't figure this shit out. No Iraqi's ever going to figure it out. Let's try to crack the code on this. And it took my team 3 months to get through the red tape and finally get a packet going. And once we cracked the system, we just started flowing. And we got about 36 interpreters out by the time I left. 6 of them who I know of, when they got here to the U.S., enlisted in either the U.S. Army or Marines, and half of them deployed back to combat as U.S. service members. You know, so these were guys I was giving weapons to on patrol because it was so lethal. Everybody needed to be in the fight, you know, and that wasn't exactly per regulation, but we needed each other. And we were protecting them, they were protecting us, and all of their family members were at risk. And I just thought, at least our families are back in Germany or in the U.S., man. Our families are off the game, but their families are in play, and that's a totally different dynamic.
Yeah,
that's incredible. I love people who take care of other people like that. You see a need and you do something. So again, I personally wanted to thank you for that.
Same. And I, just want to give a shout out to Mazim Mazan, who's one of those Iraqi interpreters that I worked with in 2007, whose family was at great risk, and to his own personal life, who was also threatened. It's just one of my heroes. And he's one of those guys, one of the, the few that got out, who came to the U.S., was sponsored by the MIT team that he worked with, and is now in the U.S. military. So, these guys who volunteered to help the coalition put their lives on the line. So we owe them a debt of gratitude. And hey, thank you so much, Steven, for helping them get out. That was huge.
Well, as you all know, it's an honor to serve and be able to help people. And, I'm just honored to be able to share with you guys. I read all your bios too. And, I'm just really grateful to be able to join you guys today.
Well, speaking of helping people, let's look a little bit closer to home, and let's turn the tables to the PACT Act really quick, if that's all right.
Sounds good.
So, obviously the journalist in me likes to do deep dives. And of course, our super producer, Holly, likes to do the same as well. And she brought a couple of articles to my attention that I hadn't seen yet that had come out recently. So I read into those. But of course, I've heard a lot of great stories from veterans that I've interviewed in the past, in the past year, really, in the past few months, and to include veteran spouses, veterans who've passed away, spouses who filed for compensation, who've been awarded compensation through the PACT Act. But I've also read, and this is tremendous news, absolutely amazing. But I've heard that it's also presenting some maybe unforeseen problems. And one of the articles that I read recently that came out August 29th in the War Horse, paraphrasing here, was that it's the VA is facing a budget shortfall for 24-25, like 15 billion. And that part of that is because of the PACT Act. Can you talk a little bit about how the PACT Act may be impacting the overall VA budget, and how Americans and alphas who are listening to the podcast can better understand the implications of what that means, and how the VA may be adjusting fire, or what's going to be done?
Sure. Yeah. And thank you, Stacy. It's that's obviously a concern for us. And really it is as a result of how successful we've been with outreach for the PACT Act, with bringing more veterans in to VA healthcare, with more claims than we've ever processed before. And I would just also thank our colleagues at the Legion and other VSOs that are accredited and help with that processing, because VSOs definitely give veterans a lot of assistance when they're filing a claim. I know for me, trying to navigate red tape isn't necessarily good for my mental health, given some of the other experiences that I've had in bureaucracy. So having somebody kind of hold my hand and walk me through it is always welcome. But you've probably seen, we've gotten just record claims the last 2 years in a row. And so in the last 2 fiscal years, we've had 4.4 million claims come in. And one of the things we wanted to make sure of too is because PACT applies to our best estimate is somewhere around 6.7 million veterans, right? Between Vietnam, Gulf War, and post 9/11 vets. So that's about a third of the entire veteran population in the United States. Now, not all of them are in VA healthcare. Many of them are not, or have filed a claim. And so we've got 9.1 associated with VA, either through the healthcare system or the benefit system or both. So about half of the nation's veterans. Previous to PACT, the reason veterans were not applying, one of the reasons was they were not eligible. And the PACT Act basically opened up this aperture to millions of more veterans who would be eligible. And so Congress planned for that with toxic exposure funds to give VA flexibility, but that's budgeted as well. And so as a result of this, success, and of those 4.4 million claims that came in, 1.7 million of them were PACT specific claims. So there's a pretty substantial, increase in input coming in. Of the PACT claims, 75% of them are getting approved. And that's really significant relative to historic levels of approval at VA. And the reason, one of the main drivers for that is the presumptive nature of the PACT Act. And what that means is, as a veteran files a claim, number one, you need to prove that you are a veteran, right? You had to have served. You need to manifest some sort of condition that would qualify you for coverage. And then normally you need to prove the nexus between those two, that your condition is as a result of your military service. if a condition is considered presumptive, and the PACT Act brought in 23 different buckets of new presumptives that equate out to over like 700 different types of conditions, all different types of cancers and stuff. You don't need to prove that nexus anymore. VA is allowed to automatically assume that if you have that condition, it's as a result of your service. And so it takes the onus off the veteran. It allows us to move much quicker in many cases. And so there are, I've had feedback from veterans that got their claim filed in like 3 weeks, which is crazy, lightning fast for VA standards, right? Back in January, we went to the Student Veterans of America convention. I think it was in Nashville, if I'm remembering correctly. And we've been trying to do what we call one VA experiences, where we bring our full suite of services to the veterans where they're meeting. And we brought one of them there with our claims clinic, and we were able to give same day decisions to 23 veterans, which is completely, unheard of, because we were set up and ready to rock right there. And that's a younger demographic. That's a lot harder for us to attract as well, because normally, you're kind of our age or maybe a little younger, and they have other health care alternatives many times, or maybe they've just heard bad things about the VA and aren't interested in, exploring that space.
That is suspiciously fast. If I got an answer back the day of, I'd be like,
yeah,
I think I'd be mixed up with somebody. This can't be right. Be concerned. Yeah.
So
I put in for a wheelchair like 6 weeks ago. I'm like, if I got it that day, I'd be thinking somebody put one in a month ago and didn't get it.
Yeah, so it just depends on how much development the claim needs, right? But if you roll in and you've got we also had C&P examiners there on site who could do a same day examination and then give a determination. And for something easily diagnosed, that's relatively easy. Obviously, there were, I think, over 300 people started claims that day, right? So it was the exception that was getting some sort of approval. And I didn't dig into the details, but I would also probably assume that most veterans are submitting for multiple contentions in a claim. It might have been partial approval for the easy ones, where the other ones required more development and would get adjudicated down the road further. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of complexity to the system, though, as I'm sure all of you know.
Well, it's a big change. It's a big change in the way of doing things. It encapsulates and puts the arm around, potentially millions of veterans. And so, kudos to what you guys have been able to do and handle, and to be able to process, record numbers of claims. And I imagine that there's probably some pretty, incredible stories, like some that you were, starting to allude to, which I think it would be great, to maybe spotlight, one or two of those. And then with, maybe the 75, the troublesome, 25% is the one that's kind of getting, caught up in one regard or another. What are you guys able to do with respect to that, and kind of the challenges that you're facing, because there's been such an influx? And it sounds like there's some innovative things that are happening that you're able to get flash to bang, a lot quicker. But yeah, any good use case stories, and then how do you address that troublesome 25%?
Yeah, so the stories, one of the things that I'm currently deployed. My wife's not exactly happy with me, right? She thought those deployment days were over, and I am deployed to DC for this mission. And the reason I would do something like that is because of those stories, right? I was in Durham, North Carolina last year speaking, and a guy stood up and he said he had filed a claim, he had been to 6 different providers in the private sector, and nobody could tell him what he knew. Something was wrong. He didn't know what it was, and nobody could tell him what it was. And he finally filed his PACT claim, got into VA healthcare, and was diagnosed with, I can't remember the type of cancer, but they immediately started trying to remedy and treat him. And I just thought, holy cow, I was advised not to take VA healthcare when I retired in 2015. And I just thought, how am I going to know what our young women and men are experiencing inside the system unless I'm inside the system too, and I had no idea. Like a lot of vets, I didn't want to go. I knew I wasn't going to go work for government contracting, or didn't want to go back to government at all. I just wanted to go, to SoCal and figure out what the next chapter was going to be.
Yeah.
I've not been disappointed in the healthcare. There are still issues with the bureaucracy that frustrate me, but the quality of healthcare is really solid, and it's veteran centric. A third of our employees are veterans, and many of the ones who are not are a family member of a veteran. They've got some linkage there. They're mission driven and focused. So those types of stories, really make it meaningful for me to serve in this capacity. To answer, let me follow up on the 25%. So those are being denied. I just want to be clear about that. Those claims, a lot of times the denial is around that there is not a service connection, meaning they were filing a claim for something that is not presumptive and could not prove the nexus, that they don't have a diagnosis. So they're claiming something, but there's no clinical diagnosis. So when they go to the CMP exam, the physician or provider, whoever's doing the exam, does not find what the veteran is claiming. So those are just a couple of examples of why a claim would be denied. It's definitely not perfect, and we work very hard. We experience challenges with a lot of the C&P exams in particular, and so our Veteran Benefits Administration is focused on making sure those providers, many times that are contracted, are meeting the right standards that we expect for our veterans. So those are just some examples of why a claim might be denied.
Thanks for that context, Steve. Appreciate it.
So I think that, you're obviously focused on, on taking care of veterans, and there's always the need there. And we're always fighting to try to find, a way to mitigate that before it even happens. But, you've transitioned from military, government, nonprofit sectors. I imagine there's a pretty decent culture shock moving between them. I know a lot of my friends say it can get a little politicky up and around E7, and I know officers are way more dramatic, so it starts around 03 for them. But how do you navigate these shifts of culture? Because
Sure.
You can't say things to a civilian that you could get away with saying to a Marine, because and talking to Marine, it saves time. You can just say what you mean and let them know how they're not meeting that need. But you can't do that everywhere. Yeah.
So, well, actually, I think the culture shock kind of runs in reverse in this example. It's, I was always a nonconformist, I guess, if you will. I needed all 4 years of West Point to beat some sort of discipline into me. And then I always felt like I was one day away from being fired in the Army, because I didn't think I was the greatest fit. But so in VA, and actually when I stood up an operations center to support the Afghanistan withdrawal and ran it out of the downtown LA in the Pacific Council headquarters. And we were supporting over 300 different nonprofits in that space. You know, I've started small teams like that in churches and, you know, in the Army and now in government. So I've got this small team called the Enterprise Project Management Office. And the reason there's a transitional, right, which makes my title run over to the second business card, is because Congress wanted to make sure that we weren't creating more big government. And so my position is temporary. It's a term position. And everybody who joined my team is either a term employee or a contractor. Nice. So that we could, and the thinking for us at least is we want to develop the muscle memory to work ourselves out of a job, right? Because what we do is we convene, we integrate, we facilitate. Where our secret sauce is getting everybody to play well together in the sandbox, right? And previously, historically, VA has not done a good job at joint, right? At joint ops with the healthcare providers working alongside financial benefits people in order to develop the right policy that was veteran-centric at its heart. And so my team, you know, we facilitate, we are a disruptive force in many ways, where we need to break bureaucratic inertia. And so I knew going in that this was going to be culture change. And I was trying to think, because when the secretary asked me and I was working through what is this position that you want me to do, first thing I did was download the VA's functional organizational manual. And I read it because that's kind of like the doctrine for the VA, right? That gets produced out of the Office of Enterprise Integration. And so I asked the deputy secretary, I was like, hey, what's this Office of Enterprise Integration do? What do you need me for? You know, I mean, isn't that what the PACT Act is going to require? And what she said was really interesting. She said at the time, VA did not have a means of governance, a formal governance mechanism that was synchronizing across the department. And so the OEI, the Office of Enterprise Integration, was developing that architecture and driving all policy. And they needed somebody to spearhead PACT implementation and the policy around that, both from a integrating perspective inside the White House, or inside the VA, but also with external partners like the White House, like Congress, like all the VSOs out there that were really lightning focused on PACT. And so that's what my team does. And that's, you know, I know you've met a couple of them.
I like that. So you're the culture shock. All
yeah,
right.
Yeah. So it's always been in reverse. You know, I don't change me. I remember, I'll give you a short vignette. I was hosting an event in Germany. A battalion commander at the time was my position, task force commander. And we were real casual. Everybody's outside drinking beer, barbecuing brats. And I was wearing shorts, some flip-flops, and an ankle bracelet. And the brigade commander's wife came up to me and she's like, "What's that on your ankle?" And I looked and I was like, "I think it's an ankle bracelet." She was obviously voicing her displeasure, but I had worn that for like my last 10 years on active duty because I just really needed to stay grounded to who I was. And the military obviously hadn't changed me. So I was good with, you know, bucking the system a little bit.
Nice.
So I know you're, you know, the brat of a Vietnam vet, if I heard that correctly.
Correct.
So the question that I want to ask is something that may have crossed your mind, or at least probably something that's come up in conversation due to your position. It's certainly come up any number of times in conversations that I've had with Vietnam veterans over the course of doing the Veterans Portrait Project and during my show with After Action. So I'm curious, does the VA recognize like generational changes in gene expression and traits due to toxin exposure, like those found in like Agent Orange? And how are families able to know if they qualify? Let's say that you're a grandkid who has one of these diseases that's presented or seemingly linked to Agent Orange. And how do you know if you qualify for benefits? How do you know how to research that? How do you know if it's indeed linked to Agent Orange? Because some reports that I've read, and listen, I'm no doctor, I don't pretend to be, but I've read a lot of conflicting reports. Some nonprofit organizations insist that yes, it's linked to Agent Orange. Some doctors say maybe ? Some people within the VA say no. So I'm curious, what's the VA stance and how is that?
Well, so number one, I'm not a doctor either, and I don't play one on television. So yeah, and this is not my area of expertise, but I do know the research from just a layman's perspective has been uneven, I guess. And I don't think there's strong consensus out there around just some of the direct exposures, right, to Agent Orange. And then so when you get into the genetic passing down, I do know we're doing some research in this space, but I can't answer for certain where we are there, Stacy. Yeah. So I'm not sure I can give you a really good answer.
Yeah, one case that keeps coming to mind anecdotally is I met a veteran whose grandson has Kabuki syndrome, and he has, two grandparents that both served in Vietnam, and both have diseases linked to Agent Orange. And so, Kabuki being such a very rare disease, very and linked to Agent Orange. So, the immediate red flag is how else would a child that whose parents never traveled to any Asian country where, anyway. So one puts that link back to that. So anyway, there are families that are making these links themselves. So I'm just curious, with these studies, how will veterans be able to continue to follow as the PACT Act unfolds and as these studies continue and to evolve, including burn pit studies? How will these continue to evolve? Where can the alphas who are listening follow what you guys are doing to stay up to date?
So the bottom line is on our website, we've got a lot of information where people can go, but I always recommend that they call our Tier 1 call center to start with. It's run by the Veterans Experience Office. And that's, we'll drop it in the chat and make sure you guys have it, 1-800-MY-VA-411. And depending upon what the question is, they can direct you to the right subject matter expert. So if it's a claims question, they'll get you to an expert in VBA who can help with claims processing. If it's a healthcare question like this, we can get you to the right information there. And I think my colleagues can also drop some stuff for you. I see Sakshi just grabbed some stuff on Agent Orange and intergenerational effects that might be of interest to you to, delve into a little bit more.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Something you said earlier that really resonated with me was, how can I expect, my soldiers essentially to go through VA medical care if I didn't? And I think that's just the embodiment of the type of leader you are and continuing to serve in all the capacities. And I think we need more leaders like you, more unconventional leaders. If you were maybe a day away from, getting fired, I highly doubt that. But I also kind of, felt that and resonated that I wasn't completely, systemized during my 10 years of, flying the Apaches, with having to adhere to, rigorous systems management. But I was intrigued at this, the OEI, the Office of Enterprise Innovation, and kind of the mission set there to disrupt some of the bureaucracy. And so is that directly applying for your position to the PACT Act? And is there potential for it to transcend beyond that? Because one of the areas that I advocate and work in is breakthrough therapies. And I know the VA is, they have an IPT team, and they're starting to look at, what does that look like inside of the VA? And, for that to ultimately be successful, there's a lot of external partnerships and things that need to happen, and new ways of thinking. And that's a very complex problem. And it sounds like your office could really help with that.
Yeah. So, my office, because we are so small, we end up having to take an appetite suppressant. And so we end up having to really be focused on PACT implementation, which is massive, by the way. It's, it was, the largest expansion of VA healthcare in over a generation. It is, it covers everything from 31 major leases to workforce authorities for hiring more competitively and retaining the talent that we hire. The whole presumptive process, all the research and everything, data and systems integration. And we've got a heavy systems development and modernization process going on, mainly inside the Veteran Benefits Administration, to handle the influx of claims and to become more efficient in that space. And so I would be happy to help find the answer to your question in terms of who could help. I'd be happy to do it if we could even say it was PACT tangential. Because what we've seen is a lot of what PACT has done is it served as a catalyst, where you've had a lot of, really strong people inside of VA who have been looking at change that they've wanted to make. And VA has been, progressing in this direction for a while now. But PACT just sped it all up. It, energized it. And
it sounds like you guys are just being really innovative in the way you're handling things and looking at things, and it's massive, what you are doing. So thank you for that. Thanks for coming and sharing that, and congratulations to what you've been able to do and the road that you have ahead.
Well, thanks, Adam. I appreciate the interchange, and please reach out. I'm a big fan of the Legion.
We appreciate so much, the time you spent. We know that time is money. Like you said, you guys are running lean. So, the time that you spent with us, I think is time well spent. We love anything that helps our veterans, lives be a little bit easier. So is there a website where Alphas can go to learn more about the PACT Act?
Absolutely. It's va.gov/PACT, PACT. Right. And that's the best place to go learn more. And you can apply, file claims. You can apply for healthcare, all that good stuff too.
We'll be sure to add that in along with your social media links to our show notes. But before you sign off, is there anything else that you wanted to share with our Alphas that we didn't discuss? We're going to continue to just push frontiers. And even though my team has a little more than a year remaining, for the most part, the whole transitional nature, we're trying to embed the capability in the Office of Enterprise Integration, in other parts of the department, this just doing business in a joint manner. And we've been most effective, I think, in the outreach side and in the presumptive space in a lot of ways between VBA and VHA. So we're pushing some pretty big frontiers right now, I would say, around deployment-related respiratory disease and all things under that umbrella, and really trying to further that research. And then the other area that we have a lot of interest on between us, DoD, and other researchers
is repetitive blast injury, and the TBI symptoms that manifest as a result of multiple, maybe non-traumatic but still like football CTE, that it's people pulling lanyards on howitzers or in tanks and just a constant concussion, or it could be, pilots who are shooting a lot of stuff, right? And it's TBI is always linked, at least medically, to a single traumatic event, an IED, right? That it's linked to, but there are so many other symptoms that are manifesting that are TBI-like, and they're yielding, suicides, higher rates of suicide, PTSD, and other conditions in the veteran population. And so we're really focused in that area, and we hope to work hand in hand with DOD. We are working hand in hand. They're trying to develop the mitigation measures to put in place in advance and get ahead before it gets downstream in the veteran population.
Outstanding. Appreciate you so much.
We thank you so much for chatting with us today, and we wish you and your team continued success, because your success only benefits our community and ours. That includes you as a veteran as well. So thank you so much for everything that you've done and are doing, and a shout out to your team, because it takes a huge team to do it. So thanks.
Well, thanks, Stacy, and thank you all. And I would just say, if you know of any veterans, any survivors who are experiencing hardship, please reach out. They can call the number, but they can reach us. You know how to get in touch with us, and we'll find a way to help them.
Well, you heard it here, Alphas. Don't wait. Give them a call. Until then, Alpha, stick around for some Scuttlebutt right after the break.
Talking about suicide is hard, but the American Legion has joined forces with Columbia University to develop training for those who want to learn more about interacting and responding to veterans who may be in crisis. American Legion Be the One training. In the 90-minute class, you'll learn to understand the types of suicidal ideation and 4 behaviors that indicate imminent risk, how to use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale to determine at-risk individuals, how to identify risk factors and warning signs, and how to communicate effectively with individuals who may be at risk of hurting themselves. Online and in-person sessions are available. Visit betheone.org/training to find a session. Learn the skills that'll give you the confidence to talk about suicide and be the one to save just one veteran.
Okay, Alphas, we hope you had a fantastic break. Now it's time for some Scuttlebutt.
There's a new documentary out there that follows veterans fight for housing until you see a camera pan over the long row of Coleman tents lining the sidewalk, nearly all with American flags neatly affixed to the front. The outrage of a veteran-specific homeless community in the heart of Los Angeles might not fully resonate. When the image is paired with the sprawling and partially empty Department of Veteran Affairs campus, this homeless veterans row abuts. The dissonance is complete. Los Angeles is, we learn, the nation's hub for veteran homelessness, with an estimated 4,000 unhoused vets. In The Promised Land, a new short documentary by Army veteran Rebecca Murga for reporting Studio Long Lead, creators are counting on those striking visuals to communicate a message 100 news stories might not. The documentary, released on Long Lead's website and recently screened before an audience of veteran advocates in Washington, D.C., took shape out of Murga's own curiosity as a Los Angeles resident who often passed by those tents. She said, "My interest was already piqued at what's been happening and why aren't these buildings being used?" In a phone interview with Hope Hodgsek of the Military Times. As it happened, her embarkation on the project came as this open-air veteran enclave became national news through a class action lawsuit in federal court. The complaint in the suit, brought in December 2023 by 14 veterans, was also at the heart of Murga's story. The vet's argument that the West Los Angeles VA Medical Center had to follow through on its commitment to build more than 1,000 permanent supportive housing units for veterans. Days after the 23-minute documentary's DC screening, relevant news broke. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development announced it would change the rule that counted veterans' disability benefits as income, a policy that excluded some Los Angeles vets from VA housing eligibility.
Wow.
The class action lawsuit went to trial in early August in U.S. District Court in the Central District of California. Longlead is publishing updates, as many as one a day, on its website as arguments progress. We're going to keep pressing with it, Pullen said. I think that it's something that everybody should see and understand, whether they live in Los Angeles or not, because this is a nationwide epidemic.
I mean, it's kind of terrifying to me that you get stuck in this weird limbo of your military retirement, whether it's disability or whether it's an actual military retirement, not quite being enough to live comfortably, but also barring you from getting help. I think there's a huge disconnect between what the money that I make now would have been life-changing 5 years ago. And that's scary. Like I would be in a totally different position 5 years ago. I'm fine. I just mean that it's scary knowing that in order for your children to be able to afford to move out and start their lives, they need to figure out how to make $65,000 a year. I mean, that if that's basically what it takes to run even a small household these days. And that's scary.
Well, I think, the other thing for consideration as well is, California prices, that's huge.
Yeah.
And, and then, inflation. So you're talking about the ability to work, is the veteran able-bodied? Are they disabled?
Mhm.
Are, what kind of things are they dealing with peripherally and the impacts of their life? Do they have dependents? Also, what kind of work is there available in that area? If we're talking about nationwide homelessness, I know here in Charleston, South Carolina, we have homeless epidemic as well. Probably not as bad to the degree of, say, California or Portland or Seattle, where there seems to be a huge problem.
Yeah.
But I've seen in recent months a lot of really great stories coming about tiny home villages popping up for veterans, and I think we need more of that. But I think we also need to address the undercurrent as to why it's happening, and provide physical therapy, mental health therapy, occupational therapy, and get the veterans the support they need so that they can have long-term housing, long-term support. And these things are happening. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think as long as people like this veteran, Miss Murga, bringing these to attention and keeping it in the forefront, I think we can continue to suss out the problems and the answers, and hopefully make sure that these veterans have the essentials: food, water, shelter.
Assuming they even admit that they need help.
Yeah. Some are some pride is hard.
Yeah.
Some people may not admit that they need it. Yeah.
But fundamentally, I couldn't agree more with what you said, Stacey, and probably be hard pressed to say it any better than you did. The Military Times story goes on to give more background on some of the veterans featured in the documentary and describes more about how Murga gained their trust to tell their stories. And that's something that we do need to do. And that's a reoccurring theme on the show, is being able to talk about through storytelling and heal in that capacity. So we'll have a link to that story in our show notes. You can find the documentary, The Promised Land, on longlead.com as part 6 of their Home of the Brave series. We'll have a direct link to the documentary in our show notes as well.
And, like I mentioned, it's not just, these young kids and young veterans who face trouble finding good jobs and being able to start their lives. Labor Department officials have found a growing number of veterans who have held civilian posts for years asking for help with resume writing and networking to facilitate their next career step. One thing that I've noticed is that all the applications that we receive when people are joining for positions at America's Vet Dogs are just one page. And so it's kind of wild to me to see somebody who has a 30-year career being kind of forced to. Is the attention span so low that it's just a one-page thing now, or is that like a culture thing? I'm not sure what that stems from.
That's a corporate, thing. Oftentimes you're try to get your full resume on one page.
Well, oftentimes when veterans first get out of the military, they're landing in a job because that's what they need to be economically sustainable. James Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary of the Veterans Employment and Training Service, said in an interview with Military Times. He goes on to say, but after they've got some education and some additional training, now they want to get connected to different careers. And sometimes you need someone to help you navigate through all of that noise, help you understand how to leverage your military training, all the professional development that you had, and how to land one of those great paying career opportunities. So that demand has been one of the revelations of the Labor Department's off-base transition training program, launched as a pilot in early 2022 to assist veterans, troops, and their spouses in accessing job training assistance on issues like interviewing, professional outreach, and resume writing. So it's, you have to get trained to even get a job. So now in its third year, the program has expanded to 37 cities in 10 states. I thought there were still colonies. I should read a history book. All targeted as areas with lower veteran employment rates than the national average. Program organizers have focused on ways to guide participants to in-demand jobs with higher pay and strong career advancement opportunities, appealing to both newly separated troops and veterans out for several years. And so as of now, program is on track to expand to 20 states by 2027, but department officials will need additional funding approved by Congress to continue the effort past the planned 5-year pilot timeline. I think this is something that the American Legion should pay a great deal of attention to, because this is exactly the kind of people that the American Legion is made to help. These people that fall through the gaps, these people that I can't tell you, rolling through Atlanta for Dragon Con, it's heartbreaking, there's veteran homeless out there, and not everyone is being completely honest. People do what they have to do to survive, so no judgments there. But how many of those 3 people that I heard say any money for a disabled homeless veteran, how many of those people just don't know how to get in the system, who don't know how to get a job, who don't know that they can actually get help through the VA? And the American Legion can help with that.
And it's not only just like that population set either. I have a college degree. I was a military officer. I got out and tried to start a nonprofit, ran out of money, had to take a low-level entry management operations, job at Target that I was very grateful for. Got some more money, went back to the nonprofit world, ran out of money again. Had to hire like a military corporate, headhunting agency to help me kind of translate my skills. And then, the only thing that they wanted me to get hired into was like low-level warehouse operations manager jobs. And I said, I'm more than that. But but it was really hard. And only through a junior military officer program at Accenture, like a big consulting firm, was I able to go in there. And then guess what? Like the program wasn't really as in depth as they sold me, in the onboarding. And it was a real sink or swim. And my family, my wife stayed home with the kids, and she was the the sole caretaker and homeschool for 3 kids. So then everything for our survival is incumbent, upon me as the male and head of household. So failure wasn't an option. And even as short as like a year and a half ago, I was on like iteration 3.0 of this transformation of like trying to serve and do this veteran soul service, work, and to be able to carve out, like you said, minimum $65,000 minimum but to be able to do that and follow your heart and passion, and even having the skill sets that I've had, it's just hard. And there's seasons where you need programs like off-base transition training program to help you level up and take everything that you've had in the military and be able to package that. And also just give yourself permission that like you're not signing up for the rest of your life. Even in the military, you think that you have the security of that job. That job is not going to last forever.
Yeah.
Pension only goes so far, and it can be taken away from you. So security.
I think the other thing is
really
you get kind of stuck inside your head too about what you think you are. And that's what you keep looking at, is how you envision yourself to be versus that looking at your potential, at what you could become.
Yeah.
And you never look past what you were. And I think allowing yourself the capacity to dream beyond what your boundaries currently are, and just going for it. And I mean, I did it. Adam, you did it. Joe, you're doing it. So you just got to go for it sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But is it easy? Hell no.
No,
But,
it's the hardest thing you'll do. It's one of the hardest things you'll do.
But the journey is so much fun. It's scary as hell, but it's fun.
Well, if anybody has any other questions about this, there will be more information on the off-base transition training program and other job help resources available through the Labor Department's website. We'll have a link to the full Military Times article and the Department of Labor website in our show notes.
All right, guys, here's a story of a real multitasker. This guy doesn't just transition between careers, he collects them. Navy SEAL, Harvard Medical School trained physician, and astronaut Jonny Kim is scheduled to serve as a flight engineer aboard an upcoming space mission next year, NASA recently announced. Lieutenant Commander Kim is expected to be launched into space, and I mean launched by a rocket, in March 2025, along with 2 cosmonauts, to spend about 8 months at the International Space Station. To say that Kim's resume, speaking of resumes, and I'm sure that's 2-sided there, Joe, is impressive.
Just resume, sorry.
It might actually be 3 sheets, double-sided. To say his resume is impressive would be a vast understatement. He served as an enlisted Navy SEAL and was later commissioned as an officer. He is also a dual designated aviator. There you go, Adam. Naval aviator, flight surgeon. And he holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of San Diego and went on to graduate from Harvard Medical School and intern with affiliated emergency medicine residency at Massachusetts General Hospital and Brigham and Women's Hospital. Kim was selected to serve as an astronaut in 2017 and then completed his advanced helicopter training in 2023. As a Navy SEAL, Kim completed more than 100 combat missions, according to his NASA biography. He was awarded the Silver Star for braving intense enemy fire to rescue 2 wounded Iraqi soldiers from a kill zone while he was deployed to Ramadi in 2006. His other military awards include a Bronze Star with Valor Device, Navy and Marine Corps Medals of Commendation with Valor Devices, also the Combat Action Ribbon and various campaign and service awards, naturally. Kim went on to deploy as a Navy SEAL combat medic to Ramadi and Sadr City, Iraq, both from which were among the most dangerous places in the country at the time. He said he decided to go to medical school afterwards because he was inspired by the doctors he worked with. But, hey, did he write a book? Because if he didn't, it doesn't count, and he was never...
It doesn't count. You didn't serve if you didn't write.
Technically, he was not a Navy SEAL if he didn't write a book. Hey, so put that on your list, Dr. Kim. Okay, anyway, he says, quote, I made promises to a lot of people that I lost that would spend the rest of my life doing something good, something positive for the world, because they left a void when they died. And I know that they would have been successful making the world a better place had they lived. He goes on to say, those are the big shoes to fill for me. And at that point in my life, I felt medicine was a good platform to spread the goodness, to leave a positive contribution. Well, thank you, Dr. Kim. Thank you for your service. Thank you for saving lives. And thank you for stepping up to be an astronaut and, literally sitting on some jet fuel and launching your butt into space.
I mean,
we look forward to the book.
These accomplishments.
Looking forward to reading your book.
these accomplishments are so vast. It's kind of like you hear them, and it's almost like it's obnoxious because he's elite and doing so many wonderful things at such a high level. But then you read like the reason why, and it makes it like even more powerful and beautiful, because it's not this outward validation of I'm trying to prove like that I'm worthy of something. It's trying to uphold promises to people lost in the ways in which he did, to be able to do the best that he can. And that's a pretty beautiful expression. And Lieutenant Commander Kim, you're killing it.
Speaking of expression, I want to call Adam out for shaking his head with mock disgust over the naval aviator.
Well, I read that. So he got that as part of his NASA training. So, I mean, that makes sense. Because I was like, how did he find the time to also fit in rotary wing aviation?
I don't know if you know this, but he's a doctor and a pilot, Adam. So
he's a doctor, he's a pilot.
Yeah, but did he fly an Apache?
Astronaut.
Can't take an Apache to space. Or maybe he will.
Yeah, he'll be the first. Movie. He'll be the first rotary helicopter astronaut. Yeah, there we go.
It's getting real thin up here.
Helicopters are great in action movies so that they can crash them and explode them. And now that I've said that, just watch an action movie and tell me if the helicopter does not explode or crash. That's the whole reason that you have a helicopter in a movie.
What was the great movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Last Action Hero, where he like
get on the chopper?
He shoots the taxi chopper in the trunk like twice, and he looks at the gun like it's broken.
That's the Predator.
Guard didn't explode.
Stacy. Get to the chopper.
Who's your daddy, and what does he do?
Hey, Joe, can you do the sign off in an Arnold Schwarzenegger accent?
All right, Alphas. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next week. Who is your daddy and what does he do? It's not a tumor.
It might be a tumor.
It could be a tumor.